The night was thick with tension, the air heavy between us like a storm waiting to explode. Nova stood in the doorway, her hands on her hips, tilting her head as she looked at me with something between amusement and contempt. "Babe, Logan is waiting in the car. Let's go. I'll introduce you to before we head out." Her voice was light, almost casual, as if she wasn't standing there telling me she was about to leave with another man right in front of me. She adjusted her dress in the mirror, flipping her hair over one shoulder, her smug smirk sending a white-hot wave of anger through my veins. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. My voice came out in a low, controlled growl. "If he sets foot in my driveway, I'll make sure he leaves in an ambulance. And if you leave with him, don't bother coming back. You'll regret it for the rest of your life." For a split second, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Hesitation? Fear? No. It was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced by that same arrogant sneer. She let out a cruel laugh, shaking her head. "Oh, please, loser. We both know you're too much of a coward to do anything. Go ahead, make threats. You'll see when I don't come back. You'll be begging me to come home. But guess what? I won't." Her words struck like daggers, each one slicing deeper than the last. My jaw tightened as she grabbed her purse and phone, throwing one last glance at me before she strutted to the door. I followed her, my heart pounding like a war drum. The moment she stepped outside, I saw him, Logan, leaning against his sleek black car, tapping away on his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. He looked up, smirking as he met my gaze. "Hey man," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Tough luck." Something inside me snapped. I took a step forward, my hands itching to wipe that smug expression off his face, but Nova placed a firm hand on my chest, stopping me. "Don't embarrass yourself, Alex," she said with a smirk. "Just accept it. You were never enough for me. Logan is a real man." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her clearly, not as my wife, not as the woman I had loved, but as a stranger. A selfish, heartless stranger. I took a deep breath and stepped back. "All right, Nova," I said, my voice cold. "Have fun." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Whatever. Enjoy being alone, loser." With that, she turned on her heel and walked towards Logan's car, sliding into the passenger seat like she had done this 1,000 times before. The engine roared to life, and without so much as a second glance, they sped off into the night. I stood there, watching the taillights disappear down the road. And then I smiled, not out of joy, not out of relief, but because she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't drown myself in a bottle of whiskey. No, I went to work. The first thing I did was open my laptop and log into our joint bank account. Within minutes, I had transferred every last dollar into my personal account. Every cent she had spent on lavish vacations, designer clothes, and expensive dinners with Logan, gone. Next, I called my real estate agent. "David, how fast can we sell my house?" "Wait, what?" "Alex, are you sure?" "Very sure. I want it gone by morning. And price it low. I don't care about making a profit. I just want it off my hands." David hesitated, but eventually he agreed. Within hours, the house was listed, and by dawn, it was sold. I packed what little I needed, a suitcase of clothes, my laptop, my documents, and walked out the front door, leaving behind everything that tied me to the life I had once shared with Nova. But before I left one final gift. On the kitchen counter, I placed a thick envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, already signed, along with a single note. "You wanted freedom. Here it is. Enjoy while it lasts." Then I walked away, disappearing into the night just like she had. 2 years passed. 2 years of silence. I rebuilt myself from the ground up. I moved across the country, started my own business, and turned what was once a devastating heartbreak into fuel. I hit the gym, worked harder than ever, and grew stronger in every way. Nova? She wasn't so lucky. I had blocked her on everything, ignored every attempt she made to contact me. But I didn't need to check up on her to know how things had turned out, because one day, she came crawling back. The first few days after Nova left felt like a numb blur. I was in shock, unable to process what had just happened. The house felt too quiet, too empty, and the weight of betrayal pressed down on my chest like a suffocating force. But I knew that if I let myself wallow in grief, I'd be playing right into her hands. So I did the only thing I could think of. I got busy. For 2 years, I didn't exist. I didn't return calls. I didn't respond to texts. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing how much I was hurting. I became a ghost, slipping out of the life she had known like I had never existed in the first place. I moved across the country, far enough that Nova would never think to look for me. I found a small apartment in a bustling city where no one knew my name, and I buried myself in work. But work wasn't the only thing I buried myself in. I buried my pain under a layer of sweat and iron. I hit the gym every day, pushing my body to its limits, transforming myself into someone unrecognizable, not just physically, but mentally. I took up new hobbies, read books I had never had time for, learned about business, about life, about success. I devoured information, sharpening my mind with an intensity one had never known. I wasn't the same man Nova had left behind. No, I was stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever to make her regret what she had done. And then my business took off. I had started small, building a brand, establishing connections, putting in long hours, but it paid off. Slowly, at first, and then in a rush. My income quadrupled, then quintupled. I was making more money than I had ever imagined. And the more successful I became, the more I realized something. I had outgrown the life Nova and I had built. I thought of her occasionally, but only as a distant memory, a fleeting thought. I no longer saw the woman I had once loved. I saw someone who had betrayed me, someone who had abandoned me for the excitement of a new life with another man. Meanwhile, back in the life we had left behind, Nova was falling apart. I had left her with everything, our house, our money, the life she had worked so hard to build. But I didn't realize at the time how quickly it would all come crashing down around her. She had expected me to come crawling back, begging for her forgiveness. She thought I would be lost without her. But as the days stretched into weeks, then months, the silence from my side must have driven her insane. She started showing up at the places I used to frequent, our old restaurant, my favorite bar, even the park where we had shared so many memories. But she never found me. She left message after message, sending me desperate emails, texts, and even handwritten letters. All unanswered. I didn't read any of them. I didn't need to. But she wasn't used to being ignored, not by me, and especially not by someone she had thought would always be there. It didn't take long for the cracks in her perfect little world to start showing. Logan, her lover, had been a thrilling distraction at first. He was everything she thought she wanted, young, exciting, and full of promise. But the moment the money ran dry, and she no longer had the luxurious lifestyle to offer, Logan had disappeared without a word. Just like he had appeared, he vanished. And there she was alone, jobless, and with nothing to her name. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But I knew Nova. I knew that she would find a way to survive. She wasn't one to give up, even if the world had just collapsed beneath her feet. It had been 2 years since Nova's betrayal, but today, I felt as though the pieces of my life were finally falling into place. Sitting in my new office, overlooking the bustling city below, I could almost taste the victory in the air. A sense of satisfaction wrapped around me like a warm blanket. But it wasn't just any satisfaction. It was the satisfaction of knowing that I had rebuilt myself from the ground up while she had crumbled. She had no idea what was waiting for her today. I was so close to my ultimate goal. So close to making her pay for every laugh, every cruel word she had thrown at me during the end of our marriage. My phone buzzed on the desk, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a receptionist. "Sir, there's a woman here. She says she knows you." I couldn't help but smile. Of course, she would come crawling back. What had she expected? That I would just forgive her, let her walk back into my life as if nothing had happened? No, she had to suffer the consequences. "Send her in," I replied coolly, leaning back in my chair and adjusting my tie. I could already hear the faint sound of high heels clicking on the floor outside my office. The moment I had been waiting for was finally here. The door opened, and there she was, Nova. But she was nothing like the confident woman who had left me 2 years ago. She looked like a shadow of her former self, her once lustrous hair tangled and limp, her face pale and tired. Her eyes, those eyes that used to hold so much fire, were now filled with regret and desperation. She was wearing the same designer clothes she used to flaunt, but they hung loosely on her frail frame, giving off an air of decay rather than luxury. I stood up slowly, feeling an almost sick sense of satisfaction as I took in the woman who had destroyed me, now standing before me, vulnerable and pleading. "Oh my God, Alex," she gasped, her voice trembling as her eyes filled with tears. I finally found you." I raised an eyebrow and leaned casually against my desk, folding my arms. "Didn't take you long to regret leaving, huh?" Her face twisted, a mix of guilt and shame. She stepped toward me, her hands wringing nervously at her sides. "I made a mistake. Logan, he wasn't who I thought he was. I should have never left you. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I couldn't help but chuckle, a dark, humorless sound that filled the space between us. "Oh, now I'm the best thing that ever happened to you? That's funny, because last time I saw you, you called me a coward and left to be with another man." She flinched, visibly wounded by my words, but she pressed on, her voice shaking. "I was stupid, Alex. I didn't see it then, but now I realize how wrong I was. I should have never chosen him over you. Please, let's fix this. I still love you." I let her words hang in the air for a moment, pretending to consider them. But in reality, I had already made my decision. My eyes locked onto hers as I leaned forward, each word I spoke laced with the venom I had been harboring for the past 2 years. "Love me?" I said slowly, my voice low and deliberate. "Tell me, Nova, did you love me when you walked out that door? Did you love me when you spent our money on your little vacations with him? Did you love me when you laughed in my face and told me I was too weak to do anything about it?" Her face crumpled at my words, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. She looked smaller now, fragile, like a woman who had once held all the power, but had now been reduced to nothing more than a shell of her former self. "I was wrong. I was so wrong," she sobbed, her voice barely above a whisper. I smirked. "Yeah, you were. And now you get to live with it." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor as I moved toward her. I could see her flinch, but I didn't care. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment where I finally got to make her understand the consequences of her actions. She stepped back, her body shaking as she tried to regain some composure, but I was done listening to her pathetic excuses. "You think you can just waltz back into my life after you humiliated me? After you made me look like a fool in front of everyone we knew? No, Nova. You made your choice, and I made mine." Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic overtaking the guilt. "Alex, please, I'm begging you. I know I hurt you, but I can't live with myself knowing I ruined everything we had." I shook my head, my smirk never wavering. "Oh, I'm sure it's really hard for you right now. But let me make it clear. I'm done. Done with you, done with all of this. You don't get to come back into my life just because you had a bad run of things. You had your shot, and you blew it." Her sobs grew louder as she stepped closer to me, but I didn't flinch. "Please, Alex. Please just give me another chance. I'll do anything." I let out a long, drawn-out sigh, as though her desperation was an annoyance, a fly buzzing around me. I picked up my phone from the desk with slow, deliberate movements and pressed the button for security. "Yes, sir." The security guard's voice crackled through the phone. "There's a trespasser in my office. Please escort her out immediately." Nova's eyes widened in horror. No, Alex, please." She rushed toward me, her hands trembling as she reached for my arm. "Don't do this. Please, I'm sorry." I didn't move, didn't even flinch. I just watched as security entered the room, 2 men in dark suits, looking completely unfazed by the scene unfolding before them. One of them stepped forward and grabbed Nova by the arm, his grip firm but not painful. She yelped in surprise, stumbling back slightly, but she didn't resist. "No, please, Alex," she screamed as they began to pull her toward the door. "I love you. Don't do this. We can fix this. I'll change." Her voice grew frantic, but I didn't feel a single ounce of sympathy for her. In fact, it was almost satisfying watching her beg, watching her fall apart, just like she had made me do all those months ago. "Get her out of here," I ordered calmly, not even sparing her another glance as she was dragged from the room. Her cries echoed down the hallway as the door slammed shut behind them. I stood there for a moment, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and relief. The weight that had hung over me for so long was finally lifting. But as I sat back down in my chair, I realized that this wasn't the end. Not yet. She would have to suffer a little longer before she truly understood what it meant to lose me. The thought sent a shiver of pleasure down my spine. I had taken control of the situation, just as I had planned. Now, it was time to let her stew in the consequences of her choices. I smiled. The sweet taste of revenge had never been so satisfying. I had thought that after everything, after the security escorting Nova out of my office in tears, that would be the last I'd hear of her. I had gotten what I wanted, the satisfaction of seeing her beg for forgiveness, humiliated and desperate. But sometimes life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, and the world wasn't quite finished with me yet. A few weeks passed, a few weeks where I could revel in the victory of seeing her finally unravel. I kept myself busy, running my business, taking the time to improve further, enjoying my new freedom. There was no more weight on my shoulders, no more constant thought of Nova and her lies. It was as if she had never existed. Or at least, that's what I tried to convince myself of. And then one evening, as I was working late at my desk, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen, and for a brief moment, I hesitated. The number was unknown, unfamiliar. I had learned to ignore anything that seemed like it could be from my past, but something about it, some instinct, made me pick up the phone. "Hello," I said, my voice smooth, unaffected, betraying none of the curiosity that had crept up on me. A weak, defeated voice came through the line, a voice that made my blood freeze for a moment. "Alex, it's Logan." I blinked, surprised. For a second, I couldn't help the short, amused chuckle that escaped my lips. I couldn't believe this. Logan, the man who had thought he could steal my life, my wife, was calling me. Of all the people to reach out, it was him. The audacity, the sheer nerve. I laughed again, louder this time, the sound echoing through the emptiness of my office. "You? Calling me? You must be desperate." There was a pause on the other end. I could almost picture Logan, standing there, his head hanging low, his pride completely shattered. He was about to learn what desperation really looked like. "I am," he admitted, his voice barely audible, the weight of it hanging in the air. "Nova's life is falling apart. She's broke, jobless, and living in a tiny apartment with no heat. She's miserable, man. She needs help." The words, the sheer vulnerability in his voice, were meant to pull at my heartstrings. They were meant to make me feel like the compassionate person I once was. But it didn't work. I had spent 2 years building myself into someone who could no longer be swayed by the pain of the past. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms as I exhaled slowly. The mockery in my voice was clear. "Not my problem," I said, letting the words sink in, making sure he understood. "She made her choice." The silence on the other end of the line lingered, heavy and thick. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, a silence that came from Logan's realization that he had nowhere else to turn. His voice, when it returned, was strained, as though every word he spoke was a battle. "Alex, come on. You're really going to let her suffer like this?" he asked, his tone pleading, almost begging. I sat up in my chair, the corner of my mouth curving upward into a smile that was equal parts cold and satisfied. "She told me I'd regret it for the rest of my life if she left." "Looks like she was wrong about that, too," I said, the words rolling off my tongue like a victory song. It felt good to remind him of the power I now held. He had no idea what it was like to be on the other side of the betrayal, to be the one who was walked on. He sighed heavily. I could almost see him rubbing his face, exasperated, as if he was trying to pull himself together. "You don't get it, do you?" Logan continued. "I'm not asking for you to take her back. I'm asking you to help her. She's a mess. She needs someone. I don't know what to do anymore." I couldn't help but feel a little amusement at his desperation. This was the same man who had waltzed into my life like he owned it. The same man who had stolen my wife and rubbed it in my face. And now, here he was, asking me to pick up the pieces of the mess he had helped create. I stood up and paced around the room slowly, dragging the conversation out for as long as possible. I loved every second of it. She wanted to play the game, Logan, I said, my voice soft and slow, deliberate. She chose you over me. And now, she's learning what happens when you gamble with people's lives. He didn't respond immediately, and I could tell he was searching for the right words. But it didn't matter. His power to hurt me had long since vanished. I get it, man. I really do, Logan finally said, his voice quieter, filled with resignation. But Nova's not the only one who's lost everything. I'm screwed too, you know. We both are. She's all I had left. She's my last chance. I could hear the vulnerability in his voice, the desperation in his words, but I wasn't swayed. I felt nothing for him. You should have thought about that before you ruined my life, I said, my tone hard and cold. You both made your bed, Logan. Now you get to lie in it. For a moment, Logan said nothing. Then, I heard him exhale sharply, the sound filled with frustration. I can't believe this. You're really going to leave her hanging like that? I could hear the disbelief in his voice. He probably thought I'd change my mind, maybe try to help her, maybe even take her back. But I had no intention of doing anything of the sort. I'm done with her, I said firmly, my voice unwavering. And if you're smart, you'll stay out of this too. Let her suffer the consequences of her own actions. I'm not the one who ruined her life, Logan. She did it herself. There was another long silence on the other end of the line. Then, finally, Logan muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite catch. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going to give him any more of my time. Goodbye, Logan, I said, my voice final. Tell Nova I said hi. Actually, don't. I don't care anymore. I ended the call abruptly, cutting him off before he could get another word in. I sat back down at my desk, a cold smile curling across my face as I stared at the phone. There was a strange sense of satisfaction that washed over me, like I had just delivered the final blow to Nova's carefully constructed life. I had won. She had lost. And Logan? Well, he had already been discarded, just like she had been when I vanished without a trace. There would be no redemption for either of them, no second chances. I had spent too long being the one who was hurt, and now they would both have to live with their choices. And me? I was moving on. My life had taken off in ways I never imagined, and the road ahead was bright. There were new opportunities, new adventures, and new people to meet. I wasn't the man who had been betrayed anymore. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone better. And Nova and Logan? They could live with their mistakes because as far as I was concerned, they had no place in my life anymore. I had won, and I would savor the victory for as long as it lasted. Months passed, and the lingering sting of betrayal faded into the background, like a distant memory that no longer had the power to haunt me. Life had moved on, and so had I. Every day that passed was a reminder that time, indeed, was the best healer. The person I had once been, angry, devastated, consumed by the need for vengeance, was a shadow now, replaced by a man who had learned to rise from the ashes. I had rebuilt my life in ways I never imagined. The apartment I had once sold for the sake of escaping memories became the foundation for something greater. I poured myself into work, but this time, it wasn't just to survive, it was to thrive. The business was expanding, the weight of my success satisfying in its own way, but it wasn't the money that mattered the most anymore. What truly made the difference was something else entirely. Her name was Olivia. She had entered my life at a time when I least expected it, like a breath of fresh air that filled the empty space I had created in my heart. I had kept my guard up for so long, shielding myself from the pain of the past. But Olivia? She had a way of making everything feel safe. She was kind, honest, and, most importantly, loyal. A quality I had all but forgotten existed in the world. We met through mutual friends, a simple coffee date that turned into long conversations about dreams, the future, and all the little things in between. Her smile was genuine, and her laugh was the kind of sound that could light up the darkest days. There was no pressure, no games, just the simple act of getting to know one another in a way that felt natural and unforced. I found myself looking forward to every moment we spent together, whether it was enjoying a quiet dinner at a cozy restaurant or taking long walks in the park. Slowly but surely, she became the person I shared everything with, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But unlike Nova, she never judged. She accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. And that, more than anything, was what made me realize I had found something real. One evening, after a long day of work, we found ourselves on the balcony of our new home. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, small, cozy, and filled with the kind of warmth I hadn't known in years. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. We had a glass of wine in our hands, the cool breeze rustling the leaves of the trees around us. It was the perfect moment. Olivia looked over at me, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. She tilted her head, a soft smile on her lips. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice gentle, but with an underlying curiosity. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. For so long, I had been consumed by anger, by thoughts of revenge, and now I was at peace. I smiled back at her, feeling the warmth of the wine in my chest. But it wasn't just the alcohol, it was the sense of contentment that had taken root deep inside me. "Just how grateful I am that things turned out this way," I said, my voice soft but sincere. Her fingers brushed against mine, and she reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. There was something comforting about her touch, something that made the chaos of the past seem like a distant memory. She looked into my eyes, her expression warm, full of understanding. "Well, I'm glad too," she said, her words wrapped in kindness. "Because if they didn't, we wouldn't have found each other." She was right. If everything hadn't fallen apart, if Nova hadn't made the choices she had, I wouldn't be here with Olivia. It was as if all the pain and loss had been necessary in some twisted way to bring me to this point, this new chapter in my life. And though it was hard to admit at first, I had begun to realize that the man I had become after the storm was stronger, wiser, and far more capable of love than I had been before. "Do you ever think about them?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't need to ask who she was referring to. Nova and Logan, the ghosts of my past. I had thought about them occasionally, but the thoughts no longer held any power over me. They had long since stopped being part of my reality, and I was okay with that. "No," I replied, my answer firm and resolute. "They're nothing but ghosts of the past." Olivia nodded, as if she understood exactly what I meant. There was no bitterness in her eyes, just quiet acceptance. She had never asked me about Nova or the details of my past, but she had always known there was something there, something that had shaped me into the man I was today. "They were part of your journey," she said softly, "but they don't define you." Her words struck me in a way I hadn't expected. It was as if she had read my mind and knew exactly what I needed to hear. She was right. I didn't need them in my life anymore. I didn't need revenge. I had already won. I looked at her, feeling the deep connection between us. It wasn't just a romantic attraction. It was something deeper, something more meaningful. In Olivia, I had found someone who didn't just fill the empty space. She made it feel whole again. She wasn't a replacement for Nova, and I wasn't trying to recreate what had once been. What I had with Olivia was something completely new, something I had built from the ground up with trust and patience. In the past, I had thought that revenge was the only way to feel justified, to reclaim the dignity I had lost. But now I saw the truth. True satisfaction didn't come from revenge. It came from moving forward, from letting go of the past and embracing the future. "Do you ever think about your ex?" I asked her, breaking the silence that had settled over us. Olivia chuckled softly, her laugh light and carefree. "Sometimes, but only to remind myself that I'm exactly where I need to be." Her response made me smile. It wasn't about forgetting what had come before. It was about accepting it, learning from it, and moving forward. Olivia's resilience, her ability to embrace the present and let go of the past, was something I admired deeply. I sat back, letting the peaceful atmosphere of the moment sink into my bones. The sky was darkening, and the stars were beginning to emerge, twinkling above us like tiny diamonds. Everything felt perfect. Everything felt right. "Thank you," I said suddenly, my voice barely above a whisper. Olivia turned to me, her brow furrowing slightly in curiosity. For what? For being here, I replied, my words coming from a place of genuine appreciation. For showing me that there's still good in the world. For showing me that I could love again. Her expression softened, and she reached up to touch my cheek, her fingers warm against my skin. You don't need to thank me. You were always worthy of love, Alex. You just had to believe it. And I did believe it now. I had spent too long punishing myself, too long holding on to the bitterness of the past. But in this moment, with Olivia by my side, I knew I was finally free. Free from the chains of betrayal, free from the weight of anger, and free to live the life I had always deserved. We stayed on the balcony for hours, talking about everything and nothing at all, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine in our glasses. The night grew colder, but I didn't care. We were warm, wrapped in each other's presence, and that was all I needed. As I sat there, looking out at the night sky, I realized something important. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about the past or the people who had wronged me. It was about the person I had become, the man I was proud to be. And Olivia? She had helped me find that man again. I had already won.